Welcome everybody to this very special evening, and it's apropos that we are in the midst of our series Outsmarting Anti-Semitism. You can see right behind you the ad for that. We're going to be having our fourth and final class of this series this Monday night. And amongst the many topics that we touched on in terms of the origin and the reason for anti-Semitism, most importantly, as far as we're concerned, is moving forward, what to do about it. And I remember in 2018, we went with a group to New York from our community. Some of you are here tonight for Shabbat in the Heights. There's actually a beautiful picture framed in the back of our wonderful trip. And if you remember, we had the honor of meeting Dr. Eisenbach. In fact, we met on Friday when we ate out at the restaurant. I don't know if you remember that. And you came over to our table and we schmoozed a little, and then you spoke in front of the community. And I said to myself, we're going to have the opportunity to bring you to our community. But as far as the most important aspect of anti-Semitism, what to do about it, when you meet a young man, 98 years young, like Dr. Eisenbach, author, somebody with courage, with an incredible story to tell, I said I could not pass up on this opportunity. So without further ado, please help me welcome our friend Dr. Eisenbach.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. You are showing an interest in our history and what to do about anti-Semitism and what to do about preventing genocides. As a Holocaust survivor, I feel a moral obligation to speak about the greatest crimes in human history that were perpetrated by the Nazis. This story should never be forgotten, because if we forget it, we could contribute to a repetition. There was a genocide of Armenians in 1917, perpetrated by the Turkish. To this day, the Turkish people and the Turkish presidents deny that it ever happened. I was practicing dentistry for 60 years, and I had some patients who were Armenians, and they were telling me that they lost their relatives, their grandparents and great-grandparents in that Turkish genocide of 1917. When General Eisenhower liberated the West Coast, he said that he personally has to go to one of those concentration camps and see those living skeletons of Jewish people. And he wants to see it personally because if anybody in the future tries to deny that it ever happened. He had journalists with him who are reporting it. I just completed making a documentary, a movie, in cooperation with a professional movie maker, Mr. William Wall. This documentary just became available on YouTube. You can see it on YouTube at no charge. 45 minutes, you'll be amazed what you see. And I encourage you to see it anytime, available 24/7, and it is available worldwide. My goal is to prevent the greatest crimes committed against the Jewish people from ever be erased from human memory. And this documentary will be on YouTube for generations and generations to come, for good people in this world to watch it and see what happened and prevent that story from being erased from human memory. As a Holocaust survivor, I feel a moral obligation to keep speaking about it. I spoke at many universities, colleges, high schools, churches, synagogues, Chabad centers all over the United States and Australia. I'm actually 98 and a half. In 1.5 years, I will be 100. Oh, I have a little arthritis in my feet, but that doesn't bother me. I have a little vision problems. I gave up my driver's license voluntarily. I have some hearing problems, so I use hearing aids. Other than that, I'm in good health and I'm a happy guy. Early on, after the war, I decided that I'm not going to give the enemy another victory by poisoning my life with depression. I have a great profession. I practiced dentistry for 60 years. I specialized in implants and cosmetic dentistry. I raised a new family. I had an extended family of about 100 people. So 4 children in my immediate family. My parents adored each other. And we had a lovely family. I am the only survivor of those 100 relatives of mine. And I'll continue speaking as long as I can. I plan to be around for quite a while. I'll settle for 120. And after me, that documentary will be around to continue giving my story. I was born in the city of Łódź in Poland, second largest city in Poland after Warsaw, the capital. Lodz had a population of 700,000. Half of them, about 350,000, were Jews. There was anti-Semitism in Poland. I personally saw 2 pogroms. But we had a good life. Lodz was a textile manufacturing center, and my father was a textile manufacturer, not on a big scale, but he employed about 30 people. He did very well. Every summer, he rented a house in a resort place from a farmer, and the farmer would come up to Lodz in the morning with a long horse-drawn wagon and picked up all our belongings that we need for the summer. And he took us to the Mountain of Cherries. That was the name of that resort place. It was only 10 miles outside the city limit, but it took that horse a whole day to get there. And us kids were sitting on top of that wagon, and we had a great time. And once we got to the Mountain of Cherries, we played soccer, bicycle riding, swimming, you name it. We had a lot of fun, made new friends. On weekends, we went to a nearby forest to pick fresh blueberries. My mother never went through the Holocaust. She died at the age of 41. I was 15. In childhood, she had rheumatic fever, and it affected her heart valves. And she passed away in 1938, before the war started. So she never went through the Holocaust. And when I speak about my mother, I like to say that she was not human. She was an angel in a human body. She would gather her 4 children, put her arms around us, and bless us by saying, "You are my greatest possession." She never knew what that blessing did for us during the Nazi era, because she died before the war. I had an older sister. She was 19 when the war broke out. No, she was, let me see, yeah, she was 19. And I was 16. I was just a high school kid. And I had 2 younger brothers. I was the oldest of the 3 brothers. The Nazis took over my hometown of Lodz without a fight. I saw them marching in. Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with Stalin a few days before the war broke out. So he decided that Stalin would take Eastern Poland and the Nazis would take Western Poland. And they would not interfere with each other's activities. A few days after they occupied my city, they took the old part of the city and started building a ghetto. They put a wrought iron fence, and every 200 feet around that fence was a watchtower, guarded by Nazi soldiers with machine guns. I have something I want to distribute here. If I can get into my pocket, that is. Would you distribute this, Rabbi? Now this picture is on both sides. It was made up by my movie director. And that figure you said there, you see there, with a machine gun pointing at that figure, that was not me. The Nazis issued an order that every Jew must be inside that ghetto after May 1st, 1940, just a few months after they occupied Lodz. And any Jew found outside that ghetto after that date would be shot to death on the spot. So we moved into the ghetto, but my sister Fela did not. Before the ghetto was hermetically sealed up, we were completely cut off from the rest of the world. No mail, no newspapers, no radio, nothing. We knew nothing about what's going on outside that ghetto. My sister and a few of her girlfriends moved to the city of Lvov in the Russian part of Poland. In 1941, which was 2 years after the war broke out, Hitler decided to attack the Soviet Union. The reason he wanted to attack the Soviet Union because there were 3 million Jews in the Soviet Union. And he wants to send them to gas chambers. He also wanted the oil in the Ural Mountains, but the main reason was to get the Jews. His top advisors, political and military advisors, told him not to attack the Soviet Union because Napoleon tried it in 1812 and failed miserably. And the reason he failed miserably is because they could not supply the front lines in those brutal Russian winters of 50, 60 below zero and 4 or 5 feet of snow. And Napoleon lost badly. But Hitler was under the influence of amphetamines. His judgment was impaired. He didn't listen to his political and military advisors and broke the non-aggression pact with Stalin. He couldn't supply the front lines. That's what they told him it will happen. He lost 4 million men at the Battle of Stalingrad, Nazi soldiers, and started retreating. And that was the beginning of his downfall. And because of that event, I'm able to stay here in front of you and speak to you. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. The Nazis took over the city of Lvov, where my sister was, LWOW. which was on the Russian occupation, but then the Nazis took it over. And we didn't know what happened to my sister Fela. But after the war, I met a lady from the city of Lvov, and she told me what happened. When the Nazis took over that city, they built a ghetto. There were 110,000 Jews in that ghetto. And the Nazis came with machine guns and killed all 110,000 Jews in 3 days. And I have never seen my sister Fela again. Once they locked up the ghetto on May 1st, 1940, they controlled the food supply to the ghetto. And they gave us just enough food so we don't die from starvation. But I saw people dropping dead from starvation in the streets of the ghetto. In addition to starvation, we had a typhus epidemic, a deadly disease. We had our own Jewish doctors in the ghetto and 2 hospitals which were incorporated into the ghetto. So we called the doctor. He had 105 fever. The doctor diagnosed him with typhus and said, take him to a hospital. So we took him to one of those 2 hospitals. The next morning, I was walking to my job. I had a little job there in the ghetto. And I was passing one of the 2 hospitals. But it was not the one that Henry was in. And what do I see in front of that hospital? A big truck, the kind of truck that's used to transport cattle with spaces between the boards. And that truck was guarded by Nazis with machine guns. And they loaded that truck with live people, 30 layers on top of each other. When I saw that, I started running to the other hospital where my brother Henry was, where I put him there the day before. On the way, I came across another truck like this. And that truck was moving away from that hospital where Henry was. I stopped for a moment to look between the boards to see if I can spot Henry. I couldn't see him. The driver of the truck had a companion, a Nazi with a machine gun. He started shooting at me, but his bullets did not reach me because I was in front of an apartment building, and I ran into the apartment building. And this truck continued moving away from the hospital, and I continued running toward the hospital. It was a three-mile run. And when I got to that hospital, I see a 3rd truck like that being loaded with patients. The hospital compound was surrounded by a wrought iron fence, 8-foot fence. Couldn't get in. So I went to the back of that hospital, and there was a crowd of people outside the fence, and nurses were handing out patients over that fence to that crowd to save them from the Nazis. I climbed this 8-foot fence. I'm 5'4". To this day, I can't figure out how I did that. And I go up to the room where I put Henry into the day before, and Henry was not there. So I asked the nurses, where is Henry? He was taken out 15 minutes ago. He was in that truck that I met in the streets. Those patients who were taken out of these 2 hospitals were taken directly to Auschwitz, to the gas chambers, and gassed the day they arrived. So I have never seen Henry again. In the meantime, they were taking out Jewish people out of the ghetto. by train load, 7,000-8,000 per train load. And they were telling those people that they're going to other camps for work, but that was a big lie. Because the train conductors of these trains told us that they take these thousands of people to camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Majdanek, where they had gas chambers, and they never saw anybody getting out of there. And they could smell burning flesh in the air. So we knew what they are doing with our Jewish people. They took my father out with a group of 600. After the war, I met one of them who managed to escape from that group, and he told me what they did with them. They had them carry heavy rocks from place to place, useless work on a starvation diet, and they all died out. So I never saw my father again. That left me and my brother Sam, 2 years younger, in the ghetto. Everybody else was already gone. One day I received an order to report for deportation. And I knew what that meant. That was a death sentence. Because we all knew what the Nazis were doing with those people they are deporting. I did not report. I disobeyed the order. And I went into hiding. Sam was with me. He didn't get the order to report. We had a one-room place with squeaking wooden steps leading to that room, 20 below zero outside and 20 below zero inside. And we put a padlock on the outside of that room. And the police was there looking for me. A number of times neighbors were telling me that. And when they saw the padlock, they just walked away. So after a month of hiding, we ran out of places to hide. And since the police was there several times and walked away because of the padlock, we decided to go back in that room. We put a pile of straw in the corner, Sam and I, and lay down in that pile. One night, we hear footsteps coming up on those squeaky wooden steps coming up to my room. And loud voices. Police is coming. 2 policemen looking for me, not looking for Sam. My heart was pounding. One of the 2 policemen had a flashlight. And he says to the other one, well, there's a padlock on that door. There's nobody here. Let's go. Sam and I had a friend put a padlock on the outside. And the other guy was a wise guy, and he says, no, let's not go. Let's knock off that padlock and look inside and see what's going on. So they went downstairs. In 5 minutes, they came back with a crowbar, knocked off the padlock, and opened the door. And the policeman with the flashlight looks around and he says, well, the room is empty. There's nobody here. Let's go. And the wise guy says, no, let's not go. Let's look at that pile of straw. And he finds us. I knew where I was going. Sam could have said to me, Jack, I know where you are going. I'm not going with you. But this is not what Sam said. Sam said to me, Jack, our whole family is now gone. It's only you and me that are left. Now they are taking you away, and I know where you are going. I am not staying here by myself. I am going with you. Whatever happens to you will happen to me. Wherever you are going, I am going. And I couldn't persuade them to stay. 3 days and 3 nights in a cattle train. And they took us to Auschwitz. And I was on the doorstep of the gas chambers. And suddenly, the train conductors got orders to change directions. So they did not unload us in Auschwitz. They took us to a munition factory in the city of Kielce. No, in the city of Skarżysko. Adjoining that munition factory was a concentration camp of 6,000 Jews with a fence and watchtowers and machine guns, and they were operating that munition factory. And this is where they took us. I met my future wife in a most romantic place, a Nazi concentration camp in Skarżysko. She was there already. And we got married a few months after the war. As the Nazis were losing on the Eastern Front, and they were losing in Normandy on the Western Front, and they were losing on the domestic front, because the Allied forces were bombing their cities to smithereens. I was right there in the middle of it. So they moved the front from Skarżysko to the city of Częstochowa, closer to Germany and farther away from the front. And we had to move those machines that we were working on, 2-3-ton machines on wooden rollers. One of my best friends fell under a machine like that and broke a leg. And he was screaming in excruciating pain. He broke a leg. And a Nazi soldier came around, pulled out his gun, and put a bullet in his head and silenced him. He wasn't about to help a sick Jew. My blood was boiling. But Jonathan was dead. We arrived in Częstochowa. The name of that company, that munition company, was Hasag. On the night of January 15 to 16, 1945, which was just a few months before the end of the war. The war ended on May 8, 1945. All of a sudden, the Nazi soldiers from the watchtowers disappeared from the watchtowers with their machine guns. And our Jewish commander of the camp said, "Don't get out of the camp in the middle of the night, it's dangerous. You can hear bullets and shrapnels flying all over the place." There was street fighting. So we listened to that advice, and the next morning, Sam and I and my girlfriend Irene walked out of the camp. Free. First time in 5 years. That picture you see on that card, with the machine gun pointed at that figure was not me. That was just to show that for 5 years under the Nazi rule, we never knew if we'll be alive tomorrow. Sam and I and Irene walk out of the camp. I enrolled at the University of Łódź. Sam joins the Polish army. Within 2 years, he was 21 years old. He obtained the rank of colonel, one rank under a general, unheard of. The army decided to send him to the city of Białystok, a very anti-Semitic city. So before he goes to Białystok, he changed his name from Sam Eisenbach to Stanisław Adamowski, as Polish as you can get it. After a while, an anti-Semite found out that Stanisław Adamowski was a Jew. And one day, Sam was coming home from his office, and that guy was sitting inside his house waiting for him. And as soon as he came in, he put a bullet in his head and he killed him. That was 2 years after the war in 1947. And the police was so anti-Semitic, they refused to investigate who did it. So I have never seen Sam again. In April of 1946, 1 year after the war, in the city of Kielce, the Polish anti-Semites came out into the streets with crowbars and killed 43 of those few Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. And we thought, now they did it in the city of Kielce, tomorrow they can do it in the city of Łódź. So my wife and I decided we are leaving Poland. Harry didn't, my brother didn't want to leave because he had that high rank. We couldn't leave. It was a communist government. And they didn't let the policy of not allowing their citizens to leave their country because they didn't want them to see what people live like in a free society. Israel didn't exist yet in 1946. Israel was established in 1948. There was a Jewish organization in Palestine called Bricha. Bricha in Hebrew means escape. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, correct.
Bricha came to Poland in the middle of the night, and they took us out of Poland through the border into Czechoslovakia in the middle of the night. I don't have enough words to praise the Czech people. They were marvelous to us. Czechoslovakia was still a free country. They were taken over by the communists later on, but at that time they were a free country. They had tables with beautiful food. They were ordered to check our backpacks. They didn't even check our backpacks. And they had elegant passenger train waiting for us, and they told us, we would take you any place in the world that you wanted to go. If you have somebody in some country, in some city, If you know the name, just let us know. That's all the information we need. And they put newspaper ads, and they found family that I had in Buenos Aires in Argentina. When we left Poland, I wanted to go to the American zone of Germany near Frankfurt, because I had some boyhood friends, the survivors. So I came to Frankfurt. I enrolled at the University of Frankfurt in the College of Dentistry. And there were 4 or 5 Jewish students in my class, and the rest of them were young Germans who were in the Hitlerjugend. The Hitlerjugend was an organization that Hitler created among young people to gain their loyalty to the Nazi Party. So we had nothing to do with those students. We didn't even talk to them because we knew that they were Nazis. But they kept their mouth shut. That part of Germany was occupied by Americans, and once the Nazis lost the war, they kept their heads down. After 4 years in Frankfurt at the university, I got my degree of DMD, and we had no intentions of staying in Germany, so we left for the United States. That was in 1950. That was one of the best moves we have ever made. In order to practice dentistry in the United States, you had to have an American degree. You can't practice with a foreign degree. So I applied to all 43 dental schools in the country, and no one had any room for me. There was 1,000 applicants for each opening. They accepted 6,000 freshman students. I had a friend who was a medical student at the University of Iowa, Holocaust survivor. He came to New York to visit his parents, and he says, "Jack, come out to Iowa, look around. I think you'll like it." So I came to Iowa in September, and the dean of the dental school, University of Iowa, was retiring after 40 years on December 31st of that year. So I thought I'll wait until the new dean takes over and then come and see him, give him a month to settle in, and then call his secretary for an appointment with him. And she set up an appointment, and I came in. I talked to him for about 15 minutes, and he says to me, "I'm just new here, and I cannot take the responsibility of accepting you with advanced standing. So I'm going to call a senior faculty member, Dr. Erling Thon." He calls his secretary. She announced on the loudspeaking system for Dr. Thon to come to the dean's office. In 5 minutes he shows up, and the dean says to him, "This is Dr. Eisenbach. I want you to meet him. He wants to be admitted with advanced standing in our dental school, but don't give me your answer today. We'll talk about it later." So I talked to Dr. Thon for about 10 minutes, total half hour between the dean and Dr. Thon. And Dr. Thon says to the dean, "I see no reason why we cannot admit him today." And I was admitted that same day. And I moved to the city of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But when I was in that school of dentistry, University of Iowa, I was the only Jew in the entire dental school, there wasn't a single student studying to become a dentist. There were some Jewish ladies who were studying to become dental hygienists, but none studying to become dentists. And there wasn't a single faculty member who was Jewish. And they all knew that I was Jewish, that I was a Holocaust survivor. They couldn't care less. There was no anti-Semitism. I was just one of them. It was a pleasure to be there. So I practiced in Iowa. I had 3 sons. I lost one. At the age of 51, he died of a sudden heart attack. So I have 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws. I have 1 grandson and 3 great-grandchildren. My grandson, Ben Eisenbach, lives in Iowa with his family. He works for a company called Medtronics, which is producing electronic equipment for cardiovascular problems. And he's a high-ranking officer in there. He's 46 years old. And he's about 6 steps away from becoming a president of Medtronics. He was just visiting me recently. It was a joy to see him. We moved to California in 1973. And I asked old-timers, what city would you recommend that we move into? Well, many of them told me move to Villa Park. And I didn't want to be too far away from the office. I already knew where my office was going to be. And I'm still in Villa Park, 50 years later in the same house. I have many friends. I belong to Chabad now for 18 years. I became Orthodox. I had once a patient years ago who was recruiting people to convert to his religion. He was a Mormon. And every time he came for his appointment, he worked on me to convert me to the Mormon faith. And he wasn't getting very far, so he asked me at one appointment, from the standpoint of religion, philosophy of life, culture, what is your main goal? And I said I didn't get much Jewish education in my youth, and my goal is to find out what Judaism is all about and what the Jewish philosophy of life is. This is my goal. I have never seen him again in my office. Then Rabbi Yazri calls me. Maybe 2-3 years later, I never heard of Chabad, and I never heard of Rabbi Yazri. We joined the Temple Bet Shalom in Santa Ana. And Rabbi Eliezer says to me, I would like to come to your office and talk to you. So after my last patient, about 6 o'clock, I set up an appointment for him. We sat around for about 2 hours, and I was just really impressed with his strength of personality, his intelligence. 2 weeks later, he calls me again, and he says he would like to come again and talk to me. So we had a similar session. After the third session, I became a Chabadnik, and I'm a Chabadnik to this day. Now, I was giving many speeches, and I always have a question and answer period, and we'll have a question and answer period today. I was asked a question: why did Hitler hate the Jews so much? So I studied this subject, I researched it, and I found a book with Hitler's speeches. And on page 222, there was an article by Hitler, and he was saying in that article why he hated the Jews. And this is what he said, I quote, "Providence has ordained that I become the greatest liberator of mankind from ancient and outdated ideas of justice and morality. And it is the Jews who brought these ideas to the world. And they are in my way, and I have to get rid of them." The high-ranking Nazis had a meeting near Berlin to decide on the final solution. They didn't tell anybody what the final solution meant, but we Jews knew exactly what it meant, because we knew what they are doing to the Jews. They're transporting to these gas chambers. So I settled here in Cedar Rapids, in Anaheim Hills, to open my office. I was the first dentist in Anaheim Hills, and we moved into Villa Park. I retired about 6 years ago, but I'm not retired. I continue speaking all over the place, but I don't travel long distances anymore. So I give it by Zoom. And I also give it in Australia by Zoom. If it's close to my house, like here, so they pick me up and bring me back home. And I can appear in person, but when it's by Zoom, it's the next best thing to being in person. We should never allow the history of the Holocaust to be erased from human memory. And this is my goal, and I think that my documentary, after me, will continue to spread my message for generations to come. I was asked the question, did I lose faith in God? And I said, once I learned, and I still have a lot to learn about the Torah and the Jewish history. And we came up with the teaching of the Torah, which is the greatest tree of life. It teaches us how to behave with different people, with spouses, children, relatives, friends, associates, business associates, under any circumstances. They ask me, did I lose faith in humanity? So I tell them the story of the King of Denmark. Did you ever hear the story of the King of Denmark? Raise your hand. A few of you did, but most of them did not. When Denmark was occupied by the Nazis, they ordered the Jewish people of Denmark to wear yellow stars. And the King of Denmark said to Hitler, if this is what you are going to do to our Jewish citizens, I am going to put on a yellow star. My entire family would put on yellow stars. Every Dane in the country would put on yellow stars, and you will not be able to tell who's Jewish and who's not. But he was concerned that they may come up with other ways to identify the Jews. So he put them on fishing boats and sent them to neutral Sweden. And in a neutral country, he couldn't do anything to them, and they all survived in Sweden, all Danish Jews. Did you hear the name of Raoul Wallenberg? A Swedish diplomat. He was appointed ambassador to Hungary when the Nazis were occupying Hungary. They were just about to ship 100,000 Jews to Auschwitz. And Mr. Wallenberg issued them 100,000 Swedish visas. They became instantly Swedish citizens, and Hitler couldn't touch them. Chiuni Sugihara. I talked about Chiuni Sugihara to Naftali today. He picked me up. Chiuni Sugihara was a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania. He couldn't stand watching what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. So he asked his government for permission to issue them 6,000 Japanese visas so they could go to Japan, where the Nazis couldn't reach them. Well, the Japanese were allied with the Nazis in those days, and they turned down his request. Well, what does Mr. Sugihara do? Knowing full well what the Japanese government will do, he disobeyed their order and issued those 6,000 visas. And I have a copy of them. And 6,000 Jews went to Japan and survived in Japan. And the Japanese government fired him from his position and brought him and his wife back to Japan, and he lived in poverty and obscurity. But now Mr. Sugihara is a great humanitarian hero in Japan, and they built a beautiful statue in his honor. And the Japanese people in Little Tokyo and Los Angeles also built a statue in his honor. Now, in fairness, I must say that not all Polish people were anti-Semitic. There were some people who risked their life, Polish people, by hiding Jews in literally holes on the ground, risking their lives. When the Nazis found out about it, they killed not only the Jews, but the Polish people as well. But that did not stop them from continuing their humanitarian work. Albania. I had a patient who had a son who was an American ambassador to Albania, and he sent me a booklet And the title of that booklet is Albania Saved 100% of the Jews. Albania was made up 90% Muslim and 10% Christians, and thousands of Jews. And when the Nazis occupied Albania, those people were hiding their Jewish neighbors in such a way that the Nazis could not find a single one. Bulgaria did the same thing. After telling them these stories, I'm answering their question. I have all the faith in humanity. Most of the world are not in favor of genocides and holocausts. Pope Benedict XVI, German Pope, declared loud with his influential voice after the war, anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity. And he urged the Muslim leaders to guide the young Muslims in the right direction. So I'm very happy to live in the United States. The United States has been very, very good to me. I only experienced that one incident of anti-Semitism in 70 years. And Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who is the head of the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, he sent me a letter. And in that letter he says, and he spoke to the skinheads, the anti-Semites, the racists, and he said to them, you are failures in education, you are failures in business, you are failures in employment. The only thing you are good at is hate. We are larger, stronger, and louder than you are, and you will never catch up with us. Yes, there is anti-Semitism, but we can counteract anti-Semitism. Rabbi Elirezi says, he's my Chabad rabbi in Yorba Linda, I'm not afraid of anybody. And nobody intimidates me. And his system is very effective. Now we had the Israeli Consul General speaking to us at Chabad recently. And he said that Israel does not want Iran to change the regime. What Israel wants is to the regime to change their policy. And I asked him, how effective is that policy? It is very effective, because there are many countries that are not doing business with Iran. And Iran is economically hurting badly. And they hope that this policy would change their policy. I am proud to be a Jew, and I will remain Jewish for the rest of my life, and I'm proud of the American flag. I'm proud of the white and blue flag with the Star of David on it, the flag of the State of Israel. And the day will come that's what Abba Ibn said, that Israel is going to stay forever and ever. And there will never be another Holocaust. If Israel was in existence in the condition it is now during the Nazi era, there would not be a Holocaust. And I strongly believe also that there will never be a Holocaust. And all civilized people are now looking for the day when we will reach that goal of never again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Eisenbach. What a story. Heart-wrenching, incredible resilience. I want to tell you, at your young age, halavai of unsgeret, the sharpness of the mind and your memory is incredible, and I want to give you a bracha, a blessing. May you continue for many happy and healthy years, and may you merit to see the redemption with Mashiach in your day. L'chaim. L'chaim for you.
Thank you.
Just 30 seconds. We hear the story, we read the accounts, and we see how propaganda and darkness has a way of getting around, right? Rearing its ugly head and spreading all over. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, taught us that a little light has the power to dispel great darkness. And everybody in this room is a person of influence. And never underestimate the influence that you could have and the impact on your surroundings. And therefore, we should all feel inspired tonight by the doctor's story to do all in our power. First of all, to get the truth out there. Yes, and to fight anti-Semitism, but on the positive, to spread goodness and kindness. The way to combat the evils of the past is to engage in senseless acts of goodness and kindness to a total stranger for no good reason. And this is the best antidote to fighting the evil that existed then, and unfortunately that still exists today. And I believe the great good doctor would like to take questions. I would like to ask for those that have questions to come up so we could hear clearly, Dr. Eisenbach could hear clearly what it is that you're asking. So George, would you come up?
Thank you very much, Dr. Eisenbach.
Thank you.
I would like to know your thoughts on the Abrahamic Accords. The Abrahamic Accords. Israel and other Muslim nations now soliciting Israel and becoming apparently friendly with Israel.
Well, the oil-producing countries in the Middle East have been very anti-Semitic. But I heard the former Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said that those countries finally realize that Israel is not their enemy. It is not. And they are beginning to warm up to the state of Israel. And one by one, they are signing peace treaties with the state of Israel. The last one was with Sudan. Saudi Arabia The Israeli intelligence once discovered that there is a plot to explode a truck full of dynamite of the royal palace in Saudi Arabia. And they notified the king who these people are. And Saudi Arabia is allowing Israeli jets to fly over their country. They all realize that Israel could be of great assistance to them in case Iran continues their warlike policy.
I don't have a question. I just want to tell you that we're Landsman. My parents are from Shiblovets near Radom and Lodz, and we had relatives that are gone from Lodz and Radom. So I wanted to tell you that we're Landsman, and they were both survivors. My mother was in Auschwitz. My father was in the Vilna Ghetto.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Wonderful.
we're Landsman.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for your story.
Yeah.
Preventing genocides is more than just a humanitarian aspiration. It is a national and global imperative. There is a book written by former American Secretary of State of the United States, Madeleine Albright, co-authored by the American former Secretary of Defense, William Cohen. They co-authored this book. And in this book, they describe how a potential killer can be prevented from carrying out his murderous plans. By political pressure, by economic pressure, by educating the people of the killer's country what they can do, and by military pressure. We don't want to lose a single life in the process, but just the presence of a powerful army can prevent a killer from carrying out his plans. And if you're interested, you can watch the documentary that I produced, and you will be amazed what you see. If you want more information, you can write to the American National Museum of the Holocaust in Washington, D.C., and you'll get any information that you want. And they'll give you materials that you can use to prevent, to help genocide and another Holocaust. Taking a bird's eye view of the condition of the Jewish nation. Before World War II, we had 16 million Jews. When Hitler got through with us, we got down to 10. Now we're back to 16. And mostly for that recovery is due to our Orthodox Jewish families, which believe in large families.
Would anybody else like to come up and ask Dr. Eisenbach a question? That's it? Okay.
Don't hesitate. Just don't ask me political questions. I don't deal in controversial subjects. I only deal in subjects that I have personally experienced.
I'll ask you a question, if I may.
Absolutely.
If there's one factor that enabled you to survive, that enabled you and gave you the strength and the courage to carry on, and now traveling at your young age and telling your story, what would you say would be the one factor that enabled you to have the strength to do this after all that you've been through?
Excellent question. Ever since I was 5 years old, I just like to sit in and listen to adult conversations. And I learned many important lessons that helped me throughout my life. But if there is one lesson that stands out, and that is that no matter how dark the clouds may be, there will always be a day when the sun will break through. What that means translated, never lose hope. I was at the bottom of the pit, couldn't get down any lower. But I always kept that idea. We paid a high price, a very high price. But the Jewish nation survived. And the Jewish nation is doing well. And our Jewish state of Israel is in a leadership position in many fields: agriculture, electronics, medicine, you name it. And we just hope that the anti-Semites will be defeated by our new policies, how to deal with it. Any more questions?
Yeah. We have a question here.
No, it's okay, I can go. I can go, Speaker George. It's a question that I was volunteering at Heritage Point, where there was a lot of Holocaust survivors that were there. And the one thing that impressed me no end was how, with all the stuff that you all went through, how you could be such kind, loving people and not have hatred in your hearts. How is this possible?
Well, when you go through so much tragedy, you realize well what hatred can do. It is hatred that led directly to the Holocaust. It is hatred that leads directly to genocides. And we have to counteract hatred. And when I speak to young people, I say to them, I have a message for you. And my message for you is, never allow your precious minds to accept ideas of hatred, because it is hatred that led directly to the Holocaust.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to once again,
Thank you for asking the question.
we like to once again say, as we say in our language, Agrese Yashakoyach, and thank you so much. And may Hashem continue to bless you with gesund, with the strength to carry on in your holy mission, amongst others, to tell your story to us, I'm sure to the students and young people. And that answer that you just gave hit the nail on the head. If you know the harm and the damage, like Dr. Eisenbach knows and saw up close, of what hatred does, what has to emanate, has to come from us? Just love. Just love and tolerance and acceptance of diversity, of differences, and not to be petty, but to accept everybody for who they are. We've endured enough as a people, and now, as the Rebbe says, we have to have love, and even senseless love. This is going to hasten the redemption of Mashiach, for which the Jewish people have been waiting for 2,000 years, close to 2,000 years. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Eisenbach. Let's hear it.